I can't help it. No, the Mask and Mind people set this up. Okay.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Good evening to everyone. Mr. Whitaker, President of the School Board. And with me tonight is Mrs. Laura John, President of the PTA Council. Mrs. George Everett of the PTA Council and the School Board. This evening. She will be the moderator for the debate session of this evening's forum. Before we start the program, I would like to thank my colleagues on the board for this positive response to the public's request to be heard on the subject of Common Core. I also thank members of our district's administration team who are here to answer questions of concern regarding the mandated Common Core learning standards. Therefore, I remind you that any questions directed to them should reflect on academic topics. Mrs. John, I give you the floor.
Good evening and welcome. I'd like to take a moment, first of all, to acknowledge dignitaries, board, faculty, staff, administration, and my PTA Council Executive Board. Without the joint efforts of everyone, this forum would not have come to pass. I'd like to echo the sentiments of Mr. Whitaker. We're going to try to stay to a tight agenda so this way we can get through everything and have everybody have a moment to ask questions. Agendas and programs have been handed out, so please refer to them as we go over them. The PTA Council is very thrilled that we are actually having this forum. It has been a long request that's been waiting, and the Board of Education has taken the opportunity to listen to parents' concerns as well as other educators in the field. We will remain impartial. This is basically perspectives of community members and educators that will be presenting their opinions and their knowledge on the Common Core state standards. The PTA Council's mission this year is to work collaboratively with the district officials as well as parents. We find that it's very important and paramount to hear the perspectives of everyone that is involved in their children's education. It is obvious by everyone that is here tonight that we are concerned about our future education and the children. And at this time, I'm going to go over the agenda if everybody can take out the program. The program will be set up into 2 different question and answer periods. All statements will be directly asked in regards to the Common Core state standards. There will be no aspersions made toward the Wapanger Central School District personnel, administration, or any other Board of Education members. Any questions or comments from the public will be respectful and only related to the practices and procedures involving the Common Core state standards in Wapanger Central School District. There will be 2 minutes to answer a question from our panelists in the first hour. A question will be posed, and when it's 30 seconds prior to the end of the time, someone will say 30. That will then give you an opportunity to collect your thoughts and end. When they say time, that will be the end of the 2 minutes, and we would just ask if we could move on to the next answer. Each panelist has the opportunity to answer a question that's asked, but does not have to if they do not wish to. You can just then raise your hand and just say, I'll pass, and I'll move on to the next panelist. Once all the questions have been asked, we will then see if we have a couple more minutes to ask another question that we have. Mr. Whitaker and I have gone over and selected from the lottery, and we have a couple extra if we have time. From that moment, we will then move into our next part of our agenda, which will be questions from the public or comments. Community member will have 1.5 minutes to either ask a question of a Wapanger Central School District Administrator, who I believe Ms. Janet Warden would designate who would answer. Mr. Whitaker? You would choose based upon the question who you'd like to answer. Or just make a comment in regards to the Common Core state standards in Wapangers. You'll have 1.5 minutes, again, at 30 seconds. Somebody will say 30, and then we'll say time, and we'll move on to the next question. In the end, we will have closing statements, and we will end our evening. At this time, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Ms. Ann Laval, who's a Wappinger Central School District community member, as well as a parent of 7 children. Ms. Peg Luxick, who's actually a doctor, an advocate for special education and elementary education. Mr. Paul Galetta, a Wappinger Central School District community member, as well as a parent of 2 children. And Mrs. Donna Teresi, a principal of Frank G. Lindsay Elementary School in Hendrick Hudson, and a parent of Wappinger Central School District students. I thank you all for coming this evening, and I look forward to a very productive evening. Thank you. Mr. Bidder. Before we proceed into this, I'm going to take a moment to ask each one to state a little bit about your background and give 5 minutes of either your bio or your perspective to your education on the Common Core State Standards. Dr. Luxick, would you like to start? Thank you.
First of all, thank you all for coming out on this very cold night. I really appreciate you all taking the time to do that. It speaks very highly of all the folks here in Wappingers. I come from Pennsylvania. My background is in education, both special ed and elementary ed. I have over 35 years teaching experience. I've taught every level from preschool through college. For a number of years, I worked for the United States Department of Education, and my job was to review and evaluate education reform initiatives. On a personal level, my husband and I are the parents of 6 children. They are all girls, except for 5 of them. Not a joke, not forget. And we are now grandparents. Let me begin by giving you a little bit of the history of where Common Core came from, because it didn't just appear out of nothing. In 1989, there was actually an education summit held by President George Bush Sr. and the then president of the National Governors Association, whose name at the time was William Clinton. And that summit led to the establishment of national education goals, and according to newspaper articles published at the time, said it broke the tradition of local control. Out of that summit came first America 2000 and then Goals 2000, which was where the states were first mandated to set achievement standards and content standards that would be applicable to all of the children. That was followed in 2001 by No Child Left Behind, which actually attached penalties and told the states that they had to create annual state assessments, and every year they had to make progress toward the standards. But they could set proficient wherever they wanted. It redefined the federal government's role in education from universal opportunity to mandating universal proficiency, saying everybody had to achieve the same thing at the same time in the same way. But the states, they said, could define proficient however they wanted. So what happened was all the states lowered the definition of proficient. And by 2008, the National Center for Education Statistics compared the state's definitions of proficient to the national assessment conducted by the U.S. Department of Education, and found that not one single state defined proficient as high achievement level as the national assessment. In fact, only 8 states defined proficient at a place where the national test would call a C- or a D level of achievement. And by 2010, 60% of our kids needed remediation when they went to school, to college. That created a ruckus. Into the gap stepped Bill Gates. And according to the Washington Post, 2 folks, a man named David Coleman, who is actually originally from New York, tried to get a job teaching in the New York City public school system, and they declined to hire him. And a man named Gene Wilhott went to Bill Gates and asked him to fund the Common Core initiative. And that's documented in the Washington Post. Mr. Gates has since poured over $300 million through his foundation into all of the organizations promoting Common Core, including Achieve, and the National Governors Association Center, and the Council for Chief State School Officers, who actually wrote the Common Core State Standards. The standards were written by a committee of 29 folks that were listed in a press release given by the National Governors Association. The press release said that all of the deliberations were confidential. We don't know why the standards were written the way they were written. We don't know who chose the 29 people. We don't know why they were chosen. We know none of them were teachers. The standards were presented as a done deal, and the website for the Common Core State Standards says that they're presented as is, and that the developers of the standards who own the copyright to them assume no responsibility and no legal liability for any child that is harmed because of the development of the standards. Mr. Gates, the primary funder, was asked at Harvard University if he thought the standards would work, and his response was, we'll have to do it for a decade before we know if it works or not. In other words, they're experimental. But Mr. Gates sends his children to a school that does not do the Common Core state standards. So his children are protected from the experiment. The standards were then pushed upon the states through a combination of carrot and stick from the U.S. Department of Education. The carrot was raised to the top funds. It was dangled in front of the states. New York got $700 million.
30 seconds.
If they adopted the Common Core standards. And the stick was the No Child Left Behind 100% proficiency mandate. New York reached for the carrot and tried to avoid the stick and adopted the Common Core state standards.
Thank you. Mrs. LaBelle?
Good evening. I'd like to thank you all very much for being here tonight and participating in this very important discussion. I'd also like to thank the Wappinger School Board and the PTA Council for hosting this event. The Common Core is not a curriculum fad. It's a legislative and regulatory mechanism which overhauls the entire education system. It's a fundamental change to everything from how our children are being educated to what they learn and even the very purpose of education itself. Most importantly, it changes who controls those very important decisions. Decisions are no longer being made by parents and educators at the local level, but by a tightly controlled conglomerate of political and financial interest groups. Proponents claim that Common Core is merely a set of standards, and that local educators and administrators have autonomy to develop and implement curriculum. But a look at the structure of the program clearly indicates that that's not the case. Because Common Core was not adopted independently as standards, it was adopted as a package with rigid conditions attached. The rigid conditions include the new teacher rating system, APPR, and the mandated implementation of an extensive data collection system which will collect in excess of 400 points of data on every student from kindergarten through their workforce years. These associated conditions are designed specifically to ensure the rigid implementation of the standards, and they eliminate any potential for autonomy with regard to curriculum implementation. Teachers' evaluations, in fact, their very jobs, now depend on student performance on mandated standardized tests. Teachers will work to ensure that students learn the specifically associated curriculum. There is no room for error or autonomy. Now I'd just like to share some facts about the Common Core. The Common Core program was implemented in utter stealth with virtually no public or legislative discourse. The standards and techniques are untested and unproven in any educational setting. The standards were not developed by educators. There's not one K-12 teacher included in the working group that wrote and developed the standards. The meetings were held behind closed doors, and there are no minutes recorded. 500 early childhood development specialists signed and hand-delivered a statement to the Common Core developers expressing their grave concerns about the impact of these standards on young children, and the developers ignored the statement. While the lower grade standards are excessive and reach dangerously beyond what's age appropriate for young children, the overall standards are quite weak and eliminate important content, including higher level math like trig and calculus. It's been said that New York State can't afford to get out of the Common Core program, but the truth is we can't afford to continue in it. The implementations of the standards will financially devastate New York State and this school district. New York State received $700 million in raise to the top funding for their commitment to adopt Common Core. But we just approved a $2 billion bond to finance the technology necessary to implement the standards. Wappingers received approximately $19.50 per student in race to the top funds. The assessments alone are estimated to cost $29 per student to administer. So we're $1.3 billion in the hole just with regard to technology, or $9.50 per student in the hole just with regard to testing, before we ever get to teacher training, actual data collection, the teacher evaluation system, curriculum development, or remediation for the thousands of students who are currently failing these assessments. I'd like to share a quote with you from a California teacher, which very much sums up how New York dove into the Common Core. Quote, "We're about to start testing on standards we're not teaching, on curriculum we don't have, on computers that don't exist." End quote. Why did we do this? And why did we do this without having this discussion first?
30 seconds.
In the past year and a half, since this issue's come to light, opposition's grown steadily from parents, educators, administrators, legislators, and school board members. It's time to stop assuming Common Core to be a foregone conclusion, and it's time to start protecting our children from the obvious dangers in this program.
Thank you. Mr. Galetta?
There are a lot of factors that influence student success, but the most important factor is the teacher. When you don't provide the time and the supports necessary to prepare the people that are the most important factor in student success, there's going to be problems. That's what happened in New York State during the initial rushed implementation of the Common Core standards. Many teachers were not provided the time and materials needed to develop and present their lessons. They were not given adequate professional development to prepare them for the shifts in teaching that were needed. Parents were blindsided by the new methods of teaching, especially in math, that are designed to help students develop a deeper understanding of the concepts, but it's a very different approach from the way parents were taught when they were in school. All of this was not fair to our teachers, not fair to our students, and it caused a lot of confusion and frustration with parents. It was the rushed implementation that was the root cause of the real hardships experienced during the transition to the Common Core standards. The question isn't whether or not we've experienced problems. The questions are, where are we now? And what's the best way to move forward? Right now, progress is being made. Now that teachers have had some time to work together, help develop curriculum, materials, and instruction, the value of the Common Core standards is beginning to be realized. Our school district has been providing more outreach to our parents to raise awareness about the concepts of Common Core and is currently planning to expand those efforts. The state has been responding to the concerns and feedback it's received from parents and teachers and has been making adjustments to the implementation. It understands that more adjustments will need to be made as we continue the transition. The bottom line is, no matter what your feelings are on Common Core, our state has 3 available options to move forward. I'm going to refer to these options as they are described in the main education policy that our state is currently operating under. The ESEA flexibility waiver, options A, B, and third option is basically none of the above. With option A, we continue working with and improving the implementation of Common Core. With option B, we spend a lot more time, money, and disruption to start over, develop and transition to another set of college and career-ready standards, basically very similar to Common Core standards, but we lose the benefits of sharing common standards with other states. And this part is very important. All of the other measures under the No Child Left Behind and ESEA flexibility waiver that have been wrongly associated with the Common Core standards remain the same. They do not go away because they are totally separate issues from the Common Core standards. Or our state can choose none of the above and return to being held accountable to the outdated and more restrictive and punitive measures of No Child Left Behind, where our state and local school districts will have less control over their educational decisions than they do right now. So to sum that up, the options are A, Common Core, B, endure everything that is involved in transitioning to something very similar to Common Core, but lose the benefits of shared state standards, and very little else, if anything at all, changes. Or we can return to the bigger problems of the policies under No Child Left Behind. I believe that staying the course with Common Core standards is our best option. But I also have an open mind, and I'm willing to listen. I'm looking forward to the second half of this forum, where those of you who want to repeal Common Core will have an opportunity to express your concerns and tell us which of the available options you would choose to move forward.
Thank you. Mrs. Teresi?
Hi. All I can say to you is welcome, parents, and I want to thank you, educators, for the opportunity of being here today. This is a conversation that is very dear to my heart. I come to you as a parent of 3 children, a school administrator, maybe one day a school district administrator, but a building administrator for an elementary school. I've been an administrator for 14 years and a teacher for 14 years. And in my building, which I had Mr. Galata come and visit, and the first thing I did say to Mr. Galata is, there are no children crying, they're not tremoring, and no one's having convulsions. We're just having a really great time. Come join me in this wonderful fantasy of education. And I think we spent a wonderful day together. Thank you. And I think the best thing to do is always to see it and to open our doors to you. Now I understand the apprehensions. It did come on us like a ball. I understand that. And at first, when we first got the first module, and my 5th graders, teachers decided to pilot it, they were a little nervous, they were a little skeptical, the vocabulary was a little different, but they did. And they were so amazed at the outcomes. They were so wanting to see the other modules and the other pieces that lie ahead for the Common Core. When I look at what is available in the Common Core, I see what I saw needed to be in teaching a long time ago. Even as I developed the curriculums for math, science, and social studies in the other districts that I worked in, Sprat Hill, Highland, and Marlboro, and now Enter Heaven. What our children have always lacked is number sense. Able to use and manipulate numbers and really get a deep understanding of what math is about. And as far as reading and writing, again, looking at articles, looking at artifacts, really taking them to the next level. No longer just spinning back, who is the President of the United States, who did this, what did that, what was the 5 amendments, but actually starting to see how things in history reflect what's going on today, comparing and contrasting, but going beyond comparing and contrasting, drawing conclusions and creating applications. My husband tells me a story about when he went to a restaurant school. And one of the things that they had to do was bacon apple pie. The teacher gave him a recipe. He was to follow the recipe, because that's how you make an apple pie. He got an A+. The teacher said, "Why did you get that A+?" And my husband replied, "Because I didn't follow the recipe. I realized if you use a little bit more baking soda and baking powder, you thicken the apples and it gives a better consistency." Teacher's response was, "You failed." That's not what the Common Core is about anymore. It's not following the recipe. It's children engaged in discussion. Children reaching out and asking more why. We are in an information age. We are not people no longer that are given, sitting down, getting information from teachers. We're going out there and we're getting our children to go out there and gather that information themselves. These Common Core standards, be it coming from NCLB, this way, that way, whatever it is, appeals to 2 big things. Number sense, which has lacked. You all know as parents, we went from borrowing, trading, but now you're not trading, because when you trade, you got to do something in between, but only one number's getting it. And you remember the days sitting in a classroom, don't ask sister any question about why you took the 1, just do it. Those days are gone. Children are asked to ask why. We are using algebraic expressions as early as the kindergarten. We're asking Johnny, what makes 10, Johnny? We're not saying 7 plus 3 gives us. We're saying what makes it, Johnny. Give us your example of it. When I asked my teachers about this, the first year, they were a little nervous. Now today, when they knew I was here doing this, they were like, tell them we love it. Tell them we're all for it. This is a time where I have actually seen educators questioning their techniques, engaged in conversations, actually seeing what's better for the kids. You know very well for so long, here comes November, what are we going to study? Native Americans, the same thing. Now we're asking children, study the lifestyle of a gentleman in the old times and compare them to nowadays. Why have we changed? There's a big change in the Common Core, and it's what we need to prepare our children for college readiness.
Thank you, panelists. We're going to move forward to the question for the next hour. We will start in this fashion. I will start with Dr. Luxick, and after each question has been answered by the panelists, I will then move to the next person in line to start. You will have 2 minutes to answer a question. Our timers will give you a 30-second warning, and then we'll say time, and we'll move to the next question. If you wish not to answer a question, just simply either raise your hand or just say pass, and we can move along. You do not have to feel obligated to answer each question if you feel that's not your forte or you do not have a perspective on it. Okay? Thank you. First question of the evening. Should a teacher's effectiveness be measured by their students' performance when the Common Core State Standards has a one-size-fits-all rigor?
The short answer is no. We have always known as educators, as a matter of fact, the National Council on Research and Education actually has published that standardized tests do not give what would be called a valid and reliable assessment of student performance. Kids can have a bad day. Their dog died last night. They didn't get breakfast. You don't know why they scored what they scored. To say that teacher evaluation is based on these assessments is unfair at every level. It's funny, I heard a teacher from Rochester, New York talking about how one of her students at the age of 6 saw her mother die in a drive-by shooting. And you want that little girl to take a test? And now you're going to evaluate the teacher based on that test? That's not fair to the little girl, and it's certainly not fair to the teacher. We have, as educators, always known that standardized assessments are not the valid and reliable way to measure student performance. And yet in this system, we're using that invalid and unreliable mechanism which forces teachers to teach to the test and doesn't give us an accurate assessment of student performance. I saw a cartoon that probably illustrates it the best. A monkey, an elephant, a fish, and a seal are lined up in front of an evaluator who said, we want this assessment to be fair, so we're going to give you all the same test. Go climb that tree. Is that a fair assessment of the fish? No, of course not. Children don't come in one size fits all. We cannot therefore assess them in one size fits all. And to hold teachers accountable for an assessment system that is not adept at actually measuring how the children are performing is unfair at every level to everyone. So the short answer is no.
Thank you. Mrs. LaValle, would you like to repeat the question?
I think I'm okay.
Okay.
I have 7 children, and I'm very blessed. They're all pretty good students. Some of them are better than others. They're very consistent in their performance on standardized assessments. 2 of my children score consistently in the 98th to 99th percentile. Every year, in every grade, they're between 97 and 98th percentile. I have other children who score very consistently, always in the mid-80th percentile. They went to a small school. They had the same teachers. Does a teacher want to be evaluated based on what's effectively an IQ test? My children don't show progression. They don't start at the 70th percentile and then next year go to the 75th percentile and then to the 80th percentile. They are where they are intellectually, and that's how they score on these standardized tests. They're not going to show progression. The teacher shouldn't be penalized. The students shouldn't be penalized. That's not what these assessments are designed to do. I have some results from different years for my children. One is the previous New York State test. One is an IO test, and this is the most recent Common Core test.
30 seconds.
Okay. On the New York State test, the student demonstrates an understanding of written and oral text with some attention to meaning beyond the literal level. They make connections between two related texts, providing some supporting information. Students' writing is generally focused and organized with minor errors. It tells you exactly what their strengths and their weaknesses are. The same thing with the IO test. The Common Core test, students performing at this level are proficient in standards for their grade. They demonstrate knowledge, skills, and practices embodied in the New York State Common Core learning standards. It tells us nothing about what these children actually know, and it gives teachers no opportunity to actually help the children where they need it.
Thank you. Mr. Galletta?
Yeah, so first of all, I guess I would need a little more clarification on what they mean about one size fits all. Do you have an idea, or probably not?
One size fits all, meaning the standards are set.
The standards are one size, because I have a hat at home that says one size fits all, and it has some clicks on the back. You can open it up and adjust it. It's very adjustable, it's very flexible. It can fit my hat, my head, it can fit your head, it can fit your head, it can fit your head. It's a very, so one size fits all to me means it's something that is very flexible and very adjustable to adapt to the people that need it. In relation to the teacher evaluation system, I mean, really, this is an issue between the teachers' unions and the local school districts or the state. I mean, they're the ones that kind of have to work this out. The bottom line is, I think it's absolutely fair for parents to expect that there's an effective teacher in the classroom. I think that's fair. I also think that it's absolutely fair that the methods used to evaluate teachers on their effectiveness is a fair process. You don't want any good teachers being labeled as ineffective for some arbitrary reasons. Now, I don't know the specifics of what methods are being used to evaluate the teachers. I'm not a teacher, I'm not in the system. But obviously, you know, there has to be, and I believe there is, you know, there has to be an appeal process, support systems in place to help a teacher if they're struggling. I mean, that's what you want, that's what you need. You don't want a teacher being unfairly labeled as being ineffective. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Tracy?
Okay. One thing I will always ask you when you look at the Common Core is remove the APPR. You know very well, you also go and look at consumer reports to see what's the best of anything that you buy. The APPR should not be something that you're worried about as a parent. That is exactly what Paul has said. That is for the unions and the teachers. You are only concerned about getting your child the best education. There's no such thing as one size fits all. There's differentiated learning in a classroom. When we go in and we're doing the War of 1812 in second grade, that's right, the War of 1812 in second grade, those kids are sitting there, they're watching, everybody comes with a different point of view and perspective. If Johnny is here and he can answer 7 questions, that's great. If he can take the 1812 war and compare it to the Korean War, the teacher's going to give it to him. But to say that we're so concerned about an APPR, it's a growth model. We want our teachers to show growth. It's just not the assessment. The assessment says, how well can Johnny read? What strategies does Johnny use when he reads? It doesn't say that Johnny has to memorize the War of 1812. He has to be able to synthesize the information and understand it and write it. Please, Do not let the APPR of teachers get in the way of a Common Core. Your children have to work and learn together, and that is knowing how to gather information, and that's what the core is all about. There's so many other things. There's the SLO, where they have a local benchmark, where the teachers are also using those assessments to see the growth. They are not a number in a school. I promise you, I am a parent and an administrator. They're not a number.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next question. Mrs. LaValle, do you feel that the Common Core state standards are discriminatory to the whole child? Should we take into consideration special education and students who are geared more towards vocational rather than college?
Our students are different. Our communities are different. We don't need the same things that other communities have. We don't have the same problems that other communities have. That's just the way it is. That's not discrimination on our part. That's reality. Peg spoke about a teacher who teaches in Rochester and watched their parent be killed. The woman had story after story of traumatic instances. These children, they just face completely different challenges. They have nothing to do with what the teacher is presenting them in the classroom. These are outside impact. Special education students. They're coming in and they're being told, you have to take the same assessment. And with all due respect to Ms. Teresi, these tests they're the same for all of these kids. And the state is pushing, and Governor Cuomo wrote a letter specifically saying we want to be able to consider 40% of a teacher's assessment to be based on these standardized tests. So they do impact what the teachers are teaching. The teachers are teaching the same thing to all of the students because they have to. That's the very definition of Common Core. It's so that every student is supposed to be learning and is going to be evaluated and assessed on the same content at their grade level. So the teachers might be able to differentiate, but at the end of the day, these kids are going to sit for a test that's going to count for 40% of a teacher's evaluation. That teacher, if she wants to keep her job, is going to make sure that she teaches what's going to be on that test. And it's going to be the same for every student.
Thank you. Mr. Galetta?
Listen, I want every student to have the same opportunity to learn, the same opportunity to succeed. We're going to start segregating students based on what? So who's going to decide how we're going to segregate students as to what level they're at, and what method are they going to use to decide? They should have the same opportunities to meet the standards, same opportunity to succeed. Mrs. Teresi invited me down to her school last week. I had a chance to sit in on an elementary class, special needs class. And these students were being taught the same curriculum as the other kindergarten classes. There was additional help, I don't know if they were other teachers or assistants in the classroom, helping these students, giving them the whatever extra help or different instruction for the individual students that they need. These students deserve to have the same opportunities that the rest of the students do.
Thank you. Mrs. Teresi?
What Paul is referring to is, in our district, we have established self-contained classrooms for children on the spectrum. Those children do receive the same Common Core instruction. When we talk about differentiated learning, we're not talking about changing the curriculum. We're talking about changing the technique. For nonverbals, they may be using iPads, and if a child cannot take the assessment, we do offer alternative assessments for those students. But our optimum goal is to take those students and put them in the least restricted environment. My child is a special education child. My child was set limits many, many years ago. I fought for those limits. My daughter right now is practically on an honor roll. same curriculum. She has dyscalculia, and she does understand the math a lot better. Our integrated co-teach children are doing a lot better with these assessments. Again, the assessments are broad. We teach the children strategies, and some of the strategies are always going to, you all are different learners. Some of you are visual, and some of you are auditory. Some people constantly write, some people just have to look and listen. That's the differentiation of learning it. But when you're walking through a school building, and you're seeing our special education students rise, when I started teaching, it wasn't like that. Those children were told, you know what, just water it down, water it down, water it down. What a disservice. My daughter today believes she can go to college. She's looking at college. She didn't think that was an option 4 years ago. And now she's looking because she was given interventions on the Common Core. She was given ways to handle literature at a different rate for herself. It can be done. But I'm asking you to please understand that it is up to the teacher to meet the needs of the child. And just because we're saying that this has to be accomplished at a certain time, it can be done. Maybe at a different pace, at a different method. But never say that they can't be exposed to the same things that other children are.
Thank you. Dr. Luxick? The question isn't, can every child be exposed to the same thing at the same time? The question is that what we should be doing in education? You know, I told you I had 6 kids. I have one girl. She's a classical ballerina. She's a principal dancer at Madison Ballet. When she was 15, the standard that she needed was to be able to do a triple pirouette because she was a professional dancer at 17. One of my sons is an engineer. By the time he was 15, he was taking pre-calc. They did very different curriculums. They did curriculums that matched what they needed and who they were. Not what some bureaucrat who never met you or your children decided was best for every child in the state. What you just heard was everybody has to learn the same thing at the same time. We can adapt a little bit, but they all have to have the same standards. No, they don't. Not only do they not have to, they shouldn't. Your children are as unique as you are. And when the government comes in with a bureaucratic fiat and says every child has to learn the same standards to the same degree at the same time, it's a disservice to every child. Whether that child just has a different path, like my dancing daughter, whether that child has special needs, or whether that child is gifted. True education leaves those choices up to you and the teacher at the local level. It doesn't have a government bureaucrat step in and dictate that every child has to learn the same things. That's not education. That's manufacturing. We don't manufacture children. Thank you. Mr. Galetta, we'll start with you. Do you feel that the required shifts in ELA were appropriate, and do you personally feel that nonfiction literature makes a student a more critical thinker as opposed to classical literature?
That's a question for a teacher.
Would you like to pass?
I guess I just did.
Thanks. Mrs. Teresi, would you like me to repeat that? Sure. Do you feel that the required shifts in ELA were appropriate, and do you personally feel that nonfiction literature makes a student a more critical thinker as opposed to classical literature?
I would say also, we're not moving away from classical literature at all means. It's not, like you say, a one-size-fits-all. We do use that. But expository writing has shown that it is easier for children to start to learn the methods of reading and writing. As we look at Marizano and many other of our wonderful educators in the field who have over time expository writing and exposing children to informational text does improve literacy. It improves them to notate, it improves them to really understand what they're reading about. We have not taken away fiction from the schools. They still have it, but they also bring in the science and social studies aspect of it. So if a first grade class is doing fairy tales, they are learning about Holland and Ireland and Hong Kong. And they are looking at the different types of places that are there through informational texts. The other day I visited a second grade class who was doing Greek mythology. They absolutely fell in love with what they were doing. They were learning more, they were summarizing, they were drawing conclusions and applying it by creating their own Greek mythologies. When we look at a fourth grade curriculum and they learn about the Native Americans and the fire keepers and how those fire keepers control the fire, but it's more than a fire, it's more about a community and a government, and they're having discussions on how those governors and governments help to build America or other countries overseas, and doing cultural events with it. They're learning, they're writing more. It's a better fit for the students. And it's not, again, a one-size-fits-all. I would challenge those individuals to come into a classroom who is using the Common Core and see for themselves. Once you've seen it, you'll see that it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Thank you. Dr. Lexig.
You know, when I was looking at the new ELA standards, I decided that the best way to figure out what was going on was to look at two things. One was, what do the textbooks look like? And second was, how are these things measured? So I went and bought the 12th grade Pearson, which is the publishing house, the largest Common Core publishing house, and I bought their 12th grade literacy series. And when I opened it up, I noticed that the very first thing that the children are told on the very first page of the children's book is that every selection in the book is available in audio format, and there's an audio Cliff Notes available online as well. Now, I've been a teacher for a long time. We know kids read Cliff Notes. As a matter of fact, if you're honest, you probably do too. But as a teacher, we tried to give them activities that I actually didn't want them to read Shakespeare, so I didn't want them to read the Cliff Notes. But the Common Core textbooks begin by giving kids auditory, audio Cliff Notes, so they don't have to read the book at all. And that's the first thing that they're told. That's a problem. Then I looked at the scoring rubric for New York State's ELA tests on your ELA standards. And in the scoring rubrics, it says that if the child makes errors in syntax, in spelling, in grammar, as long as they don't affect readability, those errors don't count. So if I wrote the letter B, the number 4, the letter U, and the number 8, do you know what I just said? Before you ate. And it wouldn't count because it didn't affect readability. That's a problem. And that's in the scoring rubrics that your Department of Education hands the folks who are scoring your ELA tests for your students. Now we have a problem because you have books to tell the children they don't have to read anything, and you have scoring rubrics that don't count grammar, syntax, and spelling. That can hardly lead to higher literacy. Always that makes the literacy go down.
Thank you. Mrs. LaBelle?
Mr. Galinja said this is a question for an educator. Dr. Sandra Stotsky is considered one of the highest regarded ELA experts in the country. She's so highly regarded that she was handpicked by the Common Core developers to sit on their validation committee. She's so concerned with the transition from classic literature to informational text that she refused to sign off on the validation statement, and she's going from state to state testifying before state legislators telling them this is not good for education. This is how, now, with regard to the testimony about how kids are doing in school, parents didn't go looking for trouble with regard to Common Core. Our kids came home and started telling us that they had a problem. And this is the very specific example that introduced me to the Common Core. My daughter came home after the first ELA exam and said, "Mom, I felt like I was told to write someone else's opinion." The assignment was explain in detail why a structured workday of 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, and 8 hours of recreation were best not only for the individual but for society at large. And she was told, and every 8th grader in New York State was told to validate that statement. I'm very concerned with who's choosing the informational texts. And the only way I found out about that question is because my daughter came home and told me what it said.
30 seconds.
We didn't see those questions. Those questions weren't released. There are 2 testing companies for the entire country. And they're deciding what our children will validate on a test, and they're choosing, and they're telling the publishing companies what's going to be tested and what they should be putting into the curriculum. She was concerned enough to say she was uncomfortable with the question. She's a smart girl. If an 8th grader is concerned that she's being told what to think, we should be concerned as well.
Mrs. Teresi? Does Common Core create an atmosphere where students want to learn? How is the attitude of students towards learning going to change by having the Common Core state standards?
Well, I can just speak from being in a classroom, teaching it myself, and observing it with other teachers. You know, you look at the little video clips on Engage in New York about the kids loving it, and that's what I'm seeing. I'm actually seeing children grabbing more books, loving it. I understand what you're saying, but I'm seeing it in a classroom. I'm seeing children who at one time weren't given a ray of hope. Children that didn't speak, children that didn't really want to put letters together. The skill strands, the listening skills are exposing the children to lands and places they've never seen. When I walk into a classroom and they want to show me that a triangle is more than a 3-sided figure using beams and how I can make it into quadrilaterals or trapezoids, and they're experimenting and building things, that's not, to me, a child that's upset. When I see children looking at Espinosa Rising and writing responses and criticizing the technique of the writer and who the characters are, as you had seen, and underlining what is important, but how it really was a sign of the culture and how it's a sign of the culture today, and creating debates and arguments, I don't see it. I don't see where children are upset. Yes, I'm not going to say that the assessments, on the day of the assessments, some kids are a little nervous, but most of the time it's because Mommy said it's a horrible assessment. And we talk to them and I say to them, just show them what you know everything, you're prepared. Gotta see into the classrooms. The children are happy. I wouldn't put a child in a place where they don't belong. I truly love my job and my education. But when you're really seeing kids asking questions more and more, and coming up to you and showing you what they're doing, and more engaged in conversation, it's really a very active place to be. And it's the best I've seen in a long time.
Thank you. Dr. Luxer?
When the Common Core standards were being written, a group of early childhood professionals started looking at them, saying, particularly in the early childhood area, K through 3, the standards were absolutely inappropriate. And in fact, as Ann mentioned, there were 500 early childhood professionals, including the 3 past presidents of the National Association for the Education of Young Children, which is considered the foremost organization for early childhood education. All 3 of their past presidents signed a statement saying that the Common Core standards were absolutely inappropriate. They didn't take into account at all how young children learn, what they ought to learn, and how we ought to teach them. When the standards were finally released, Dr. Carla Harwitz from the Yale Child Study Center said that the biggest tragedy is how so many of our teachers are quitting in despair because they're hurting children and they won't participate in it. I traveled the country. I've been involved in education for more than 30 years, and I have worked and continue to work in a number of states, both at the local level and at the state level, testifying in front of state legislatures, training districts and even Catholic school dioceses in how to teach both classroom management. When the special ed law that our principal referred to was passed, 94-142, I was the regional trainer for the Northwest Quadrant state of Pennsylvania. So I've spent a lot of time in education. When parents across the country step forward saying our kids are having problems, we should listen. Because parents are busy. You know, I raised 6. I didn't have time to go to 500 meetings. But yet I see people coming out all over the country because they're so concerned about the response of their children to these inappropriate standards. Homeschooling, private schooling are all running at all-time highs because people are voting with their feet to get away from the standards that are hurting their children. We should listen when parents say there's a problem. We shouldn't tell them that the problem is their fault.
Thank you, Mrs. Lavelle.
As I said, parents didn't go looking for trouble. We found each other. We all went online and started to say, you know, what is this? Where did it come from? Why is my child having a problem? People are coming and saying, my child is doing homework for hours on end. It's not because adults don't know how to do 3rd grade math. It's because 3rd grade math isn't 3rd grade math anymore. The other most qualified standard expert on the Common Core Validation Committee was Dr. James Milgram. And he is from Stanford University. And he also refused to sign off on the standards. The only mathematician, the only math standards expert refused to sign off on the standards. He not only goes around the country with Sandra Stotsky testifying before state legislatures, he has recommended that parents of children as young as 1st grade and up pull their children from the math classes. He finds the techniques so questionable and inappropriate that he's concerned that it will cause these children irreparable educational harm. He's not suggesting that you get extra help. He's not suggesting that parents in school districts teach parents how to teach children. He's saying these methods don't work. And we found each other because the children are uncomfortable and they're struggling. And not because it's difficult, because it's counterintuitive. There may be some great things going on in these classrooms. But the fact of the matter is, there's problems too. And the reason we have to keep saying that it's all okay is because the mechanism that's been put in place prohibits us from fixing it. It needs to be gone.
Thank you, Mr. Valletta.
I thought the question was something about shifts in ELA standards, something like that. Is that where was that? This was like how long ago?
Do you want me to reread it?
Yeah.
Sure.
We're talking about, all of a sudden talking about parents looking for trouble and things like that. What are we doing?
Does Common Core create an atmosphere where students want to learn? And if so, how are the attitudes of students towards learning going to change by having the Common Core state standards in place?
Well, once again, the shifts in learning, you would have to be a teacher to understand what was being taught initially and understand the shifts in learning right off the bat. But to address what Mrs. Lavelle was saying about Dr. Milgram, according to his own report that himself and Dr. Stotsky wrote, he refers to himself as the only mathematician on the validation committee, and then he refers to several other mathematic educators and people with doctorate degrees in mathematics. He also says that the standards are, at least in his view, better than 90% of the state standards they replace. Ms. Stotsky refers to his remarks saying that Milgram's remarks that the Common Core standards are better than 90% of the state standards should not be construed as a compliment to Common Core, but as an indictment on most of the state standards. Milgram is saying that as weak as the Common Core standards are, about 45 states had even weaker standards. So this is his argument. He also says that most of the states would be far better off adopting the core mathematics standards and keeping their current standards.
Thank you. Dr. Loxick, we'll start with you. If school boards do not have a say in the standards, nor have control over the implementation, then what venue would you think is most appropriate for parents to voice their concerns?
That's actually a really excellent question, and I'm glad you asked it. And I feel sorry for school board members because they really can't change this, although, to be frank, school boards can whine really well.
I hate to want to interject just for a second. That was a little you did, right?
This is what I picked and he said, I love it.
So where do you take your concerns? You start at the federal level. Common Core is carrot and stick from the federal government. You have elected congressmen and senators. Let them know that you want federal bureaucrats out of your local classrooms. So start at the federal level. I see we have here tonight state elected officials. You should also be speaking to the members of your legislatures in Albany, because they too are able to step up and stand against the federal government. Elected officials matter. You know, it's a shame that the folks with Common Core have brought politics into our kindergartens. But if we want to get our kindergartners not to have to deal with politics, we as parents are going to have to take the fight to Albany and to Washington and tell the politicians to get their fingers off our children. That's the way you fix it.
I like the question too. School boards are limited as to what they can do, but there's plenty that they can do which hasn't been done. We could have notified the parents of what was happening. We could have had this forum a long time ago. In fact, we were told this by the school board. You guys, there's nothing we can do. That alone should have sent the hairs on the back of every person's neck standing. Since when is there nothing that school boards can do? If there's nothing that school boards can do, then why do we still have school boards? We were told we needed to take this concern to Albany. And then we said, okay, let's tell the community what's happening so they can take their concerns to Albany. And we had an election, and every seat in Albany, including the governorship, was up for election just this month. But we didn't have this forum until tonight. So if we have to go to our legislators, then come with us. Help us get there. Let the community know what they need to do.
Thank you. Mr. Galetta?
So, as I pointed out in my opening remarks, there are laws that we have to follow. And basically, we have three options. We continue with Common Core. We replace Common Core with another set of standards that are college and career ready, very similar to Common Core. And really nothing else changes. All the other requirements remain the same. Like I said before, the third option is you refuse the first two, and you go back to the provisions of No Child Left Behind. The place to address your grievances with Common Core is with the politician, with the state legislature. So that's where it is. You can come to the school board and you can express your concerns, but continuing to tell them the same thing, they hear you. The state has heard you. The state has made changes to the implementation. They're listening to the feedback of the teachers and the parents. They're responding to what you are saying.
Thank you. Mrs. Teresi?
Yes, to tell you the process to repeal it is, talk to your senators, talk to that, whatever you want. I guess I sit here in amazement when I hear things like kindergarten having a problem counting to 10. That's what I'm seeing them do. I can't understand why we would want to repeal the ability of a child saying that 7 and 3 give me 10 and 6 and 4 give me 10. Looking at old, right now our kindergarten, if you look at literacy, we're looking at Humpty Dumpty and we're looking at things that I had when I was a kid. And I grew up just fine. I would say that I guess you would go to your boards would go to your state legislators. I mean, they're just asking right now for the process and the repeal. I really can't help you with that.
Thank you. Looks like time is drawing near, so Mrs. Laval. Do you feel that using standards to measure student achievement is appropriate when the only thing they have in common is age and grade?
No. Our children are different. Our communities are different. Within the same community, our children are different. My children are different. I have 7 children. They excel at different things. They've reached, they have different talents, they have different capacities, they have different organizational skills. I understand we can't tutor every child where they are, but there's a whole host of options in between. Everybody comes here and we tutor every student. We have to recognize our differences in our children. We're hurting them. And standards, why did we decide that if we have a problem, and even the problem that we have is debatable across the education community, but if we had a problem, how did we decide that standards was the issue and that's what needed to be changed and implemented? We need to look at our communities. That's why education was supposed to be local, because we know what challenges our communities face. We know what challenges our own children face. That's why we were supposed to be included in this process. To suddenly decide that the answer to all of our education woes is a set of standards, it makes no sense to me. 30 seconds.
Thank you. Mr. Glover?
So the standards are basically benchmarks or expectations that students have to meet at each grade level. On the way, the whole idea behind the Common Core standards, they can be college and career ready when they graduate high school. There's a growing recognition in our state and in our country that high school students are graduating high school not prepared to enter freshman year of college. In New York State in 2013, less than 40% of the high school graduates were prepared at the college and career ready level. So this is what the standards are trying to address. They're trying to get more students prepared. Well, could you imagine the outrage if 8th grade students in the Wapner Central School District, if less than 40% of them were ready to go to 9th grade? There's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between students being able to graduate 12th grade and being enter basically the 13th grade. So absolutely, the standards should be set at each grade level so students know where they're at every year, parents know where they're at every year, and they can be tracked to be ready to go to college or enter a career when they graduate high school.
Thank you. Mrs. Teresi?
I just want to say that when we looked at the Common Core, I think educators were a little happy in the fact that when we had students coming from other states from different areas, even within the tri-state area, we weren't seeing that students were at the same levels. Children from New York City, children from Albany, children from Westchester County were not all at the same level. But at the end of the day, those children need to be as competitive as to go to a college or vocational school or even to get a job. Even today, getting a job is a very difficult situation for 17 or 18-year-olds. And how often I see employers who say they can't count change without a register. They can't use their common sense. I give them a situation to read and they can't solve the problem. It actually said that we have to look at communities and change our standards to meet and fit the community. We have a big world out there that those children have to fit into. but they have to be people that can actually work and live in any community that they choose to. They may not always live in Wappingers Falls. They may decide to go to Westchester County and go to Scarsdale. Okay, whatever it is, we have to prepare our students to be where the best they can be. When you're looking at Common Core standards, please understand, when we're looking at that, we're looking at teaching children strategies, comparing, contrasting, but going a deeper level of meaning. We're not asking them to do things like solve engineering situations in the kindergarten. It's not there. Please, before you draw a conclusion on it, I ask you to visit a classroom and see how it runs.
Thank you. Dr. Luxick?
Let's move into healthcare. Should we measure all children by the same standard based on their grade and their age? So by the age of 8 in 3rd grade, all children should be 3'10" and weigh 89 pounds. It's ridiculous, right? Learning is as individual as your physical development. You can't mandate that all children are the same and expect it to work. You know, I'm old. My children will tell you I was old as Methuselah. And I was teaching before the standards-based movement ever existed. In fact, when the standards-based movement came in, Goals 2000 and then No Child Left Behind, after 10 years of it, as you just heard, 40% of New York children needed remediation at the college level. It didn't work. What I did was double down on a system that didn't work. Why didn't it work? Because if everybody has to meet the same standard, you must move at the pace of the person who moves the most slowly. Because that person can't go more quickly. So it immediately slows it down. And in fact, that's what the research says. The University of Connecticut actually did a study on standards-based education, and what they said was, it puts a ceiling on what children learn. It holds the gifted and talented children down. It puts teachers under pressure to teach to the test. And the lower the socioeconomic level of the district, the bigger the pressure. It increases remediation time, because kids spend all of their time trying to either pass the test the first time or getting ready for it the second time, which means they're not doing art, music, computers, and extra language. So the curriculum narrows. So what has the standards-based movement given us? It's given us lower performance, narrower curriculum, more pressure, and bad results. And Common Core doubles down on something that all the research says doesn't work. If we want education to work, you have to go back and look at the premise. It isn't about implementation. It's that the idea that you can mandate every child meet the same standard at the same time in the same way is flawed at its root. You can call a pig a princess, but it's still a pig.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to thank the panelists, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Bittaker, who will move on to public comment and questions for the WCSD administration, and then we'll come back in a short while for closing statements from our panelists.
Thank you, Mrs. Giacomo. Very nice job. I want to compliment the panel. Your answers were, I guess I would use the adjective superlative in my mind. And I appreciate your efforts this evening. Thank you again. Okay, I'm going to open up the meeting now to questions from the public to the panel or to the administrative team that is here. They will answer questions regarding academics only. Now, I do have one question I want to start with, and you can go right after me. Okay? I had this question sent to me via email personally. Under the new standards, will students have higher level math such as trigonometry and calculus available to them if If the answer is no, why not? This I would direct to the administration team. Assistant Superintendent Wharton can, Mr. Mensch, do you want to respond to that question?
Good evening, Todd Mensch, District Coordinator for Math, Science, Business, and Technology. It is my understanding that there will be no limitations on the math that students can achieve. We currently teach advanced placement courses, as well as college credit-bearing multivariable calculus, which is our capstone course. The new Common Core Learning Standards have a pre-calculus course that is has been created, standards-based course. So that would be something that is standardized for all students to have the opportunity to take. And again, the advanced placement courses, as to my understanding, will still be available for students.
Thank you. Young lady.
My name is Marcella Burns. I also like to read history. And I don't know if the panel realizes it, but Bill Ayers, a domestic terrorist, has written Common Core. And he is behind Obama, and if you look at Obama-matics and Obama healthcare, the numbers don't add up. And it's not right for our children to be subject to communist propaganda. And if you read the book Toward Soviet America, you will see that the National Department of Education is a communist concept. Taking over our schools locally is a communist concept, and it's not right. And we as parents and educators and people who, I have 2 children, and they both graduated from Shenendehowa, the biggest school district in New York State, at the top of their class before any of these standards came up.
30 seconds.
And what they did was, at each level from the grade school up, they grouped the kids according to their abilities, and they moved them towards all their classes together. Not one kid, when they graduated, did not go, hardly any of them did not go to college, hardly any of them did not have an honors degree. My kids graduated cum laude from RPI, my son works for the State Department, and my daughter is a Spanish teacher with a master's from Union. My kids did very well without Common Core, which should be called Communist Core.
Excuse me. I will take that as a statement, not a question.
The question is, why did you implement a program that was developed by a communist terrorist, the domestic terrorist, Bill Ayers? Why did you not investigate who was behind this Common Core?
Well, this panel didn't create Common Core.
Before I buy something, I decide where it's coming from. Before I put my money down on something, I want to know who's behind it, what the agenda is.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, my name is Diane Bagby. My question is about the Smart Schools Bond. Are you aware the small allotment you will receive applied against the cost for internet connectivity and security, tech support teams on site in every school at all times, security and accuracy of forced online tests and scoring guaranteeing at least 75% being uncompromised? Given these costs proving prohibitive, where is the money that should be applied towards actual and real education? And what is your honest justification for applying this money above and beyond greed? And are you unaware that this is an alternative means of data mining?
And the question, I'm sorry, what is your question? Are you making a statement? Or?
No, that was a question. That was an absolute question. You're going to apply for the Smart School Bond, put everybody in this district in the hole for a minimum of 30 years, all for technology, where all that money plus is going. What are you putting into the classrooms to teach the children?
Is there anybody on the panel who cares to answer that?
Sadly, this is going to eat the resources. The technology alone, there was actually an article, they interviewed Mr. Gates asking about all the money that he was putting into Common Core, and because Microsoft put out a statement, it's in the Washington Post, saying that everybody would need the latest version of Windows, and they would of course need the most up-to-date monitors, and Mac products wouldn't do. And so Mr. Gates was asked, well, did you do this out of the goodness of your heart, or did you do this because Microsoft is going to make a lot of money? He didn't answer the question.
Because the answer is the money goes back to him.
Microsoft is going to make a great deal of money out of this.
Exactly.
Sadly,
and I want to know where they're going to find a computer that's going to last with the multitudes of children using them, that's going to last more than 3 years. As soon as I bought my computer, 6 months later it was obsolete.
Yeah, well, it's not just the computer, it's the software system that will need to be upgraded as well. And yes, the estimates are that this is going to need a great deal of resources. I was in the state of Tennessee, and particularly the poorer districts, whether they were rural or inner city, were greatly concerned because they didn't know where they were going to get the resources.
They're not getting enough to start with. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Stephanie Lavelle. Anne is obviously my mother. I'm her oldest of her 7 children. I graduated from John Jay in 2009 with honors and went on to Dutchess Community College where I was on the honor roll. I am currently attending cosmetology school. I wanted to make a quick comment about the comment that was made that we're not asking 3rd graders to answer engineering questions. I have a friend who, a couple weeks ago, posted a photo on social media of a math worksheet that clearly says at the bottom it's from Common Core. I'm not going to stand here and read you the whole worksheet, but her comments towards this were, and I read verbatim, quote, "What my 4th grader has for homework, Common Core curriculum. I learned this my first semester of nursing when I was 18. If this is something that an 18-year-old learned her first semester as a nursing student, how can you expect a 4th grader to answer the same question?"
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Coyle. I'm actually here from Clarkstown Central School District in Rockland County. Just quickly, I have 3 girls, all enrolled in school, right on target average, high honor roll student, and another child with learning disabilities and some special needs, giving me an interesting perspective on, as a parent, on what's happening in our schools today. I have a quick statement and then a question. Something that comes to my mind is regarding my special needs daughter. Personally, I haven't been able to find or doing my own research, any well-researched and informed policy directives that address the needs of the special education population right now regarding literacy. I think raising standards and expectations without sufficient attention to known cause and remedies for reading and academic failure, also without substantial influx of any new resources to educate and support teachers, isn't likely to benefit students with learning difficulties or disabilities. My question is, how does Common Core impact children who turn out to need or already need additional academic supports for things such as ADHD, reading disabilities, or any other educational concerns? I work with teachers. I know a lot of teachers personally and in my family as well. And they're struggling, and the students are struggling, especially those with special learning needs. And I'm greatly concerned about it. I'm just looking for comments and suggestions or proven research regarding the Common Core. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone in the panel would like to answer that question? Address that question?
I can address it just from, being with students with special needs and having a special ed daughter. What we are doing is we do look at the Common Core, and then we develop with the support of psychologists and social workers and AIS specialists, we do devise a different response to intervention for those students in their everyday program. So we do expose them to the techniques of the Common Core, but we do expose them in a different sense. We use smartboard activities, we use iPads. Some children are nonverbal, but we still have to teach them the 5 senses. We still have to teach them about Native Americans. The way we do it is a little bit different, and our support staff really gets involved and helps with those child. That's why we have the response intervention teams that we do in our district.
The greatest challenge quickly is going to come with the PARCC assessments in our state. A lot of children are going to have great difficulties and schools aren't going to be prepared nor the students.
Right now, some of the districts are actually putting in things like iReady and actual computer programs to make it fun for children. They're like cartoon characters that help with assessment and learning. And believe it or not, some of the children are really doing very well. It's visual, it's interactive, it's something that keeps them engaged in the learning, yet teaching to the Common Core and increasing the lexile values. And you know, just a quick story, we had an elementary principals meeting, and for the longest time, we said that, you know, kindergarten would leave with a lexile B, but when the new state standards came, new Common Core came, they wanted us to move the lexile to D. We were frantic, oh my goodness, what are we gonna do? And all of a sudden, we were seeing that kids were going into C's and D's. And then we say to ourselves, oh, did we set the standards too low? You know, maybe we got a little too comfortable. So we do have certain techniques and certain things with technology that do help to meet those needs of students. And I, as an advocate for special education, I'm working on that all the time.
Thank you.
Can I just...
Sorry.
The Common Core doesn't have a research base in any aspect. Therefore, there's no research base to go with special ed either. It's an experimental program for everyone. When I look across the nation, what I see in the literature, in state documents, and in talking to practitioners, there's a lot of what's called scaffolding. In other words, we get the same content, but then we try to, if you think like a window washer and a scaffold, so we put extra things around it. So we give the kids extra vocabulary before we start, and we tell them who the characters in the story are going to be before they read the story, and we rephrase the sentences. But the problem is, since the teachers can't change the content, what they are trying to do is change how they present the content. But the question is, when do you remove the scaffold? Because unless that teacher is going to become surgically attached to that child's hip, so they can always provide the scaffold, education is about being able to do it eventually by yourself. But because the teachers can't change the content, all they're permitted to do in this system is give them support so they can do content they can't really do. They never are able to do it by themselves. And then when they hit the standardized test, frustration sets in. And so kids, you see their self-esteem just crumble because it wasn't real in the beginning. And that's important.
Any other panelists to address that question? Yes?
I already said it, but I'm sorry, but the teachers can change the content. We do actually have the content change. The standards are different. What they have to do is different. But the content in which they do it in and the materials that they have, we do differentiate.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Teresa Longo. I'm a parent of 3 children in the Wappinger Central School District. For the last 48 hours, I have edited my statement, but after hearing comments tonight, I basically crossed everything out and have something else to say. I really want to know how many tests you have to give little Johnny to become a war historian in 2nd grade. Was he taught? Did he understand? Or was he just tested and tested and tested? How many tests do our children need to endure? Common Core has destroyed the love of learning. What happened to learn, grow, then test? There is no longer time for that with these standards. As a parent, I would rather my children have a personal connection with a great teacher at the warehouse in a classroom dedicated to just preparing for online Common Core-based tests, which my children refuse and do not take, and which is a parental legal right.
30 seconds.
Common Core is a tangled web that is intertwined with many different companies, corporations, agencies, and billionaire fingers in our educational pie. But in the end, it's all about money and taking control of our children and their education. And in the end, my children belong to me, not the state.
Can I comment on that, Mr. Bitterman?
I'm sorry.
Just very basically, the Common Core standards are a separate issue from the test.
Pardon me.
Let me ask one. I don't use all my time. How do you know this? Have you researched? Do you know about
Just a minute,
standards?
please.
Are you educated in the standards? Have
I'm
you
educated
researched
enough
for
to
3
know.
years?
Absolutely.
I've researched. 3 years I've been researching this. So, go ahead.
You must have missed the part where it's clear, very clear, that the standards are separate from the test. Obviously the tests need to be aligned to the standards, but the standards are not the tests. And the other thing is, if you get rid of the Common Core standards, you're not getting rid of tests. You're going to have tests on whatever the next set of standards that come in. It's very clear. It's not the Common Core standards that brought the tests. It's a separate issue.
This is the results of this is what you get in response to your child's hours and hours and hours of assessment. The student is performing at this level, are proficient in standards for their grade. They demonstrate knowledge, skills, and practices embodied by the New York State K-12 Common Core Learning Standards for English Language Arts Literacy that are considered sufficient for the expectations of this grade. These tests were not designed to give us feedback on how our children are doing. These tests are to rate teachers. Our children have been pressed into service for the state for free.
It's not just the state. New York is a field test state where the Pearson Company, which is a private corporation, is using your children as the guinea pigs for field testing. That means they don't know if those questions are good or bad, to validate how they build a test. Now, if a pharmaceutical company wants to use people to validate their drugs, they bring them in and they pay them a very high salary to do that, and they volunteer. But in your state, your children are being forced in the state assessments. Part of the questions are field test questions, meaning they're experimental. And sadly, the field test questions appear when your kid sits down to take the test, the field test questions come before the questions that count for promotion or graduation. So that means they're tired and frustrated by the time they get to the questions that count. The Pearson Company is using your children as free child labor to validate their programming without having to pay anybody to do it. And that's obscene.
The field testing of the test has nothing to do with the Common Core standards. Field testing of exams has been around for decades. And if you bring in other standards, you're going to continue to field test those standards. That's part of the process. It's part of how the state evaluates whether, how accurate the tests are. That's part of the process. It's been part of the process for decades. It's going to continue to be the process, whether you have Common Core standards or whether you have a different set of college and career ready standards or a different set of any type of standards. It's a totally separate issue. It's not the Common Core standards. Common Core did not bring the field testing. It's been around for decades.
I just have a question. In Wappingers, we do take the regions, correct? Which are standardized tests, which children have to memorize materials and accomplish that material by a set date. Otherwise, they fail or pass. And those regions, correct me if I'm wrong, administrators, these are state tests under lock and key, where there should be some field tests. So we've been doing regions in New York. I don't want to date myself, but I'm saying I know about 30 years. And I know you were doing that before. before me, probably back in 1955, right, Mr. Whitaker? So, right. So what I'm saying is, well, when we're testing 3rd or 4th or 5th, even the middle school kids, we're preparing them. But it's a different kind of test. The Regents used to be memorize this, memorize China, memorize all this, spit it back, talk about it. These kind of assessments are different. These assessments are reading information, and giving back what you understand from that information. Because, like I said, these children have to go on in life. They're not going to be told to do X, Y, and Z. They have to learn how to do it on their own. And I think you need to, in some ways, I understand you're upset about the assessments, but I think you need to look at what the core itself is teaching. And I haven't heard anybody tell me that they are against children reading for meaning. I haven't had anyone tell me you're against taking the number 63 and letting me know there's different ways in an algebraic expression of doing that. So that's where I'm a little confused.
Thank you. Next question or statement.
Hi, my name is Casey Silvestri. I graduated from John Jay High School in 2013. My question refers to the example you used, Ms. Teresi, in your opening statement. You said that your husband received an F after admitting that he increased the amount of ingredients he used in his apple pie. And then afterwards you said that if he strictly followed the recipe, he would have been able to keep the A that he originally received. And then after that example, you said that Common Core is about engaging students using this approach. Well, with all due respect, I think this prohibits creativity. And having gone through the Wappinger Central School District 2 years ago, I am very happy to say my teachers challenged my innovation and allowed me to think outside the box. Because some of our most significant human achievements were created with tweaking this recipe. So my question is, I would like to know how this new approach to learning allows our kids to be creative and innovative with a mandated curriculum telling them how to think.
You can choose to adopt it or adapt it, which we've done. What you also have to understand too is what we're trying to teach the children. Even if they're telling us that this is how we have to teach fractions, they can solve it multiple ways. I was in a 2nd grade classroom and we were doing number lines. Not every child did it the same way. They deviated from it. They weren't wrong. They solved the problem, they got the correct answer. How they showed it, that was up to them. We give them strategies, 4 or 5 strategies. If you go back years ago, like I said before, I was told by the sisters, just carry the one and don't ask any questions. Those days are over. The kids are actually breaking down the numbers, showing them in different formats, not just one format, several formats, having discussions and say, I did it this way, well, I did it this way. And it's a lot different than the way it used to be worked, just do it this way. We are seeing 4 or 5 different ways. I'm speaking about a district that has also been involved in it for 2 or 3 years. I've worked on curriculum mapping for many years, over 15 to 20 years. And one of the things that we were missing always, especially when we went to the accelerated program for students in math, was number sense. They really didn't understand it, and we're trying to build that more in the Common Core. But definitely, believe me, there are multiple learners in these classrooms, and they are making growth, especially at General.
Can I make a comment? A follow-up?
Mrs. Lavelle would like to, did you want to respond to that?
I did.
Mrs. Lavelle wanted to respond to your question also, is that all right?
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering if I could make a...
Mrs. Teresi, but Mrs. Lavelle had to say something.
Yeah, I was just wondering if I could make a follow-up question based on the response. So I'm just wondering why my 7th grade brother gets the answer marked wrong on a math test when it's the correct answer numerically, but he solved it his own original way.
And we need to talk about teacher training, and that's a totally different story.
Beg your pardon. Beg your pardon, please.
I'm sorry. That's why differentiation is in the classrooms. And if he gets the right answer, and it's still marked wrong, you know, I remember that day when my daughter got it wrong because she didn't do the big number on the top and the little number on the bottom, but she edited it right. I had to go in and fight her and say that's not what the standard says. It says that the child needs to add. How he or she chooses to add, and if I put in the number bonds and the child uses it, that's great. But if the answer is right and the child comes to it and can explain it, then I think we need to address and speak to your teacher.
Then I'm still waiting for those examples on creative learning.
Another part to that would be, listen, there might be an easier way to get to the answer. But what the teacher's trying to show the student is that to understand the problem and show the work and understand what, so that as the child moves through that grade to the next grade, they'll have a deeper understanding of the math rather than just memorizing, a quick and easy way to do it. That's the concept behind that.
Mrs. Odell, finally.
I learned from the nuns too, and I carried the one when they told me to carry the one, and most of us did. And we've allegedly created a world that's so complex that we're afraid our children aren't going to be able to function in it. Well, who created this world? People who carried the one when somebody told them, you need to carry the one. There's a place for creativity, and there's a place for the simple facts. And we shouldn't be confusing the two.
Thank you, young lady.
Thank you. I'm Rob Rubin. I'm a member of the community, and in full disclosure, I'm also a member of the board. I'm proud to say, by the way, that I grew up in a country that wasn't college and career ready, but somehow didn't start World War II, but finished it successfully, put a man on the moon and returned him safely, and somehow managed to become the greatest country on earth. I have a question, which I think might be directed best towards Mrs. Warden. We've repeatedly heard that from the powers that be, that the Common Core is supposed to be data-driven. The results justify the means, so to speak. And I'd like to know what empirical data has been presented showing us that this new curriculum is significantly better than the old curriculum in each subject area.
There isn't any. There's no research supporting the Common Core state standards. We keep using the words college and career ready, but maybe it would help if we defined them.
Yes.
Is it? No?
The question was addressed to...
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I don't mind at all.
Thank you. Yes, please. I believe that you directed the question to the Assistant Superintendent. Did you know, Mr. Rubin?
So you're asking me how our students are progressing over the years?
No, that's not what I'm asking. What I've asked is that we have been plunged into this new curriculum, this Common Core. And what I've asked is that what empirical data has been presented showing us that this new curriculum is significantly better than the old curriculum in each subject area.
Well, I think that the panel stated before that the old curriculum really had some restrictions for students moving on to be college and career ready. The old standards, when our students went on to college, they were really lacking the basic skills to enter college level courses. So looking at our old standards, many of our students were not successful when they went on. So the empirical data is looking at, I think Mr. Glenn spoke before, of what we had before. And what we had before was not working for our students to be college and career ready.
That really was what I was asking, but thank you.
Can I respond? The question was, what is the data that says this will improve that situation? And there isn't. In fact, Yes. In fact, there's an organization called the National Center for Education and the Economy. Its president is a man named Mark Tucker. He advises the U.S. Department of Education on the implementation of Common Core. And he has actually, his organization has a document called What Does It Mean to Be College and Work Ready? Vis-a-vis the Common Core standards. You can find it online. And the document says that it means being ready to go to a community college. In that, it means Algebra 1 by the end of your sophomore year in high school, I'm quoting, because the document says, since most community colleges start with Algebra 1, you don't need Algebra 2 in high school to go to college and take Algebra 1, that since only 5% of the careers out there need more than Algebra 2 to accomplish them, it's a waste to teach that in high school. David Coleman, the architect of the Common Core Standards, is now the president of the College Board. The senior vice president who works for David Coleman, he's a man named Trevor Packer, he addressed the American Association of School Superintendents in 2013 and was asked about the Common Core Standards for math, and he said that AP Calculus sits outside the Common Core sequence, that Common Core slows the math progression down so that children will not get to calculus. When you look at my own state of Pennsylvania, the high school graduation math requirement for, we don't call them regions, we call them keystones, is Algebra 1. In New Jersey, which is like you, a governing state in part, the children have to pass either Algebra 1 or geometry or Algebra 2, only one of them, to graduate from high school by the 11th grade. So when we look at the folks who are actually implementing the standards, when we look at the people who have been involved in their development and what they say they mean by college and career ready, they're very clear that math is lower than what we're used to, that this is not designed to raise the bar, it's designed to lower the bar. The new SAT test, which will be out in 2016, eliminates whole sections of math. And time for the same reason.
Thank you. Any next question?
Dr. Urban Miller, I'm director of the Math and Physics Exploration Center. We to some extent act as a educational testing group. I've worked with many of the schools in the district. I've taught teachers. I've taught at New Pulse. And in looking at the way discussion is going this evening, the panel got completely off of the core. What we're really interested in is that every 10 years, a Common Core type of concept comes out where we try to correct the problems in the education before. And what Common Core has done this time is they've said, you know, we haven't really addressed the problem totally, let's really go at it. And of course the difficulty with trying something new is it's new and there's errors that are going to be made. And so what we have seen with Common Core is over the past 2 years is the state and the schools have been responsive and changes have been made. They may not have been made at the rate that we'd like to see them. The two questions which I have to come up with is, for the school is, how do you interact with the parents and fit that into the changes that you make and the reflections that you get back to the state? The second question is, how do you measure what's going on so that you can make changes? Because one of the things which I've noticed, you know, in response to the principal from the Hudson School, is that the children that I've worked with haven't reflected really major change as a result of core. The brighter children, even they still have some problems. And I know from the testing procedure, that's what you have to look for and say, well, how do I work the system out? So the question is what are you doing in a positive fashion to take the response from the parents and integrate that and make changes with the system, and then how do you measure that? So that's both for the school and for the town.
In my district or in the Wappinger Central?
Well, let's start with the Wappingers district.
A few things that we've done so far. A lot of our principals do have nights where they highlight literacy and they highlight math for the teachers and for the parents. Also, we've gone around and we have implemented a new standards-based report card, so we've had an opportunity to speak to parents about what is happening at each of our grade levels. We've also had an opportunity to go around and talk to the parents about our new math program, our Math and Focus program, so that the parents were also aware. The most important thing too is that the standards in the Wappingers district, the standards in the state do not dictate the curriculum and the teaching methods in our school. We have teachers that meet constantly. They're called our curriculum ambassadors, and they come and they talk about what's happening in the classroom, and we look to adjust. We look at formative assessments. So we look how the students are actually reacting to the standards, and we change and we bend our curriculum to manage that. Did you say time?
No, it's 30.
So we meet constantly. So we're constantly looking at our programs, we're constantly looking at our assessments, we're constantly looking at our practice, most importantly.
Okay, so the follow-up question on that is, in looking at other schools, parents seem to be more with the schools. What I've noticed in this particular audience, there's a certain mean-spiritedness. And that seems to work contrary. Instead of working with the school, they bring up these side issues and challenges. And the question is, and this now is for the panel, how can we get the audience, to work with the school rather than to sit there? I mean, Mr. Gletto has made some good points in terms of, if we throw Common Core away, you don't have anything. So the question is, how do we sit down and work with that and meet the parents' objections, and so we don't get this battling back and forth? Because one of the things which I've noticed with the panel, this side aggravates the audience, and this side annoys the audience. So, what's wrong here? Okay, so that's a question for the four of you.
I can tell you that I am involved in the school district. I serve on several committees, and I can't tell you how impressed I am with our teachers and with our staff, how dedicated and professional they are, and to be a part of those committees is a really good experience for me. I've been coming to the board meetings basically for the past year and a half. It's difficult. Like you said, the atmosphere has been rough. So I have got up and spoken only occasionally in support of Common Core and trying to show support to the teachers and to the standards themselves to make progress and to give it a chance. It's been a hard transition, but it's a new system. I'm willing to give it a chance. I think what the district is doing is start to do more outreach. I was at the board Monday night. You know what? Maybe it's late. Maybe it's late. Maybe got ahead of the curve. Maybe people were caught off guard. They didn't realize the reaction that this was gonna be. But they recognize that. They have been coming to the PTAs and presenting information on Common Core, and they intend on expanding those efforts through the principals of the school, from what I understand.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can say that what we've done is actually have the nights for the parents. We've also created module helps for the parents, actually handouts the parents will have for every unit that the children go through so they understand what we're doing. We've opened the school many times and for PTA presentations, or we've opened each of the elementaries and had other elementaries visit. I have to say, I'm looking at the turnout tonight. You must be doing something right. I didn't expect such a little turnout. So hands on to Wappingers Central, because I can only say that it started this way in other districts, and the numbers have slowly dwindled. And this is one of the largest districts in Douglas County, and you're looking at a very small town. So congratulations.
I'd like to thank you for answering my questions. I just have one request, that you invite me to your school.
You are more than welcome. You stop right by. I love you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Mrs. Lavelle.
First of all, I would disagree that that the school district is responsible. First of all, I would disagree that this is only happening in Wapanger because we know it's happening in school districts across the state and across the country. In answer to the question, how we can work together, the school district could respond to the actual concerns that the parents are bringing. Responding as if we're speaking a different language isn't working. We're asking for specific responses. We're asking for communication. We asked a year and a half ago to express our concerns formally before the board, and it's taken a year and a half for us to get here. Okay? This was hosted. We asked to have it before we could take it to our legislators, which we were told to do. We didn't ask for a new report card. The reason this audit, I'm not going to assume why this auditorium is empty, but we get letters home for bake sales, and we get letters down for book fairs. Where was the letter inviting the teachers? About how the board was going to, how the district was going to communicate better with parents. It's not happening, and it's not the parents.
I'm in Westchester County, and I got informed, and even my board was aware of tonight. And I got an email, and I didn't tell my board really, and I got an email from my board saying, oh, Mrs. Teresi's informed. So it's out there. It was in the Poughkeepsie Journal. It was everywhere. So I'm surprised it wasn't. Yes, it was. Actually.
Excuse me. Pardon me.
That's how I got
Hi. I've heard about the communication, and the question was, how can the two sides get together? And then in response, what I'm hearing is, well, we're teaching parents how to do this. We're marketing this better. That's not listening to the concerns of the parents. That's not working with the parents. That's saying, no, we're doing it, and we're going to work harder to convince you that what we're doing is right and what you think is wrong. That's not communication. That's not working together. Parents aren't looking for better marketing materials. Parents are looking for people to sit down and say, well, what are your concerns? And how do we address them? And maybe we do need to change things. Similarly, you've heard now multiple times tonight, well, if we don't do this, what would we possibly do? You know, education actually existed before No Child Left Behind was written. Many of us were involved in it. In fact, before the federal government got their fingers into our schools, this was the country where everybody sent their children to be taught. Maybe the answer is to tell them that.
Next question or statement. I just want to remind people that this is over at 9:30. Okay?
I'll be quick.
Okay? So, I mean, take care of the people that are behind you. You know, I want everybody to be able to answer the question and make a statement. We have to cut off.
So I'm here actually from Yonkers to back you up that Common Core does exist. I traveled a very long way to come and learn here at this forum because we don't have these forums in Yonkers. So I'm Carrie Reardon. My son is just 6 years old. This is an open question. The standard is KCC B4C. Understand the relationship between numbers and quantities. Connect counting to cardinality. That's the way it's written. Understand that each successive number name refers to quantity that is one larger. My questions are these. What grade did I just read this question for? It was open. So the answer is kindergarten. My child just turned 6 years old. I flooded social media reaching out because I was desperate, having a learning disabled child. My next question is this. Are these standards age appropriate for a then 5-year-old who is now 6? That's all. Thank you.
We are referring to KCC 4. Cardinality. First, second, third, fourth, fifth place.
The question was, is that appropriate for a kid? I can't even,
Are you reading off the standard or are you reading off a test question?
I'm reading, however it gets sent. To be honest, I don't know. I can't help.
You're reading the standard. That's for the teacher.
Okay, this is the exact same thing that came home. If I cannot help my child, homework is independent reinforcement of the classroom. If I have a college degree, 3 of them, and I cannot help my child, who can?
Okay, but that's what I'm saying. When the gentleman was right here and asked, what can we do? Districts have put together sheets for parents in very simple format, which breaks down what cardinality is, what it means, and actually...
So your parents who are learning disabled, who are illiterate, who are lower economical status, how do they learn these standards?
Well, it is up to the principal and it is up to the teacher to understand their population and reach out.
No. I'm not getting I'm responsible, let me help the student. I'm not hearing that. What I'm hearing is, what it sounds like you're saying is, we have class, we have this, we have that. The standards are being changed. There was a Disability Act. There was a Disability Act. Has that accommodated children with disabilities? There is no provision. So if you are, I don't know, autistic and I'm 199 in IQ, you have to be at the same page that I am.
That's in those classes, which I do have children on the spectrum, they are doing this. They use a smart board technique. It is broken down. They maybe put the ducks first, this one second, this one third. There's visual tools. I understand where you're coming from. The district...
Visual, if the child is blind, how do they see that visual tool?
She's asked the question, answer the question.
It doesn't make sense.
Okay, there's no debate between...
I'm sorry, with all due respect, you can't answer because there is no answer. I'm going to sit down so the next person can go. Thank you.
I can give you an answer.
Mr. Guerrero? You want to speak?
Yeah. I'm sorry, what's your name? What's your name?
My name?
Yes.
It was Carrie. Really?
Karen. Okay. So I would have to see the specific example you're showing, but if you're telling me that a teacher is sending home a standard out of the Common Core standards for a child to, the standard is not the method, the standard is not the instruction, that's the end result.
You said it was the teacher. I'm putting it back in your court. You said it was the teacher. You said one size fits all.
There's no debating here.
Fit my
There's
child.
no debating between the public and the panel. The panel answers the question that was asked.
Sorry.
Okay? Because, as I say, we have to cut off here shortly, and I want everybody to get a chance to ask their question or make a statement. Young lady. It's you.
Hi, thank you all for being here. So happy to see you, and you're welcome anytime. And I also want to give you a round of applause because you folks are doing incredible based on what you learned and how you got here today. Woo! Sorry. That also is extended to our teachers who are magically incredible to put up with all this. And that's from the heart. All right, I also had to edit quite a bit, so forgive me. I was going to hit on the special education. First of all, the processing of these children's brains cannot process the same that any other child can. It's not comparable. Therefore, if they're handed a test based on what they were taught in school, they cannot read it, they cannot comprehend it, because they are not up to that ability. It's impossible. There are scientific studies, there are psychological studies to all support this. So special ed is definitely ignored. The 20 steps to the math problem. I don't need a first grader giving me 20 steps to add 7 plus 3. There's no reason for it. Those kids need fundamentals. Learn, master fundamentals and facts. Then that gives them all they need to start thinking for themselves. They're not being given these fundamentals to learn, to enable them to start thinking for themselves. They need facts, they need consistency. That is what enables them to be able to use their own brains to move forward. They're not given that right now. Everything's a guess. There's 2 wrong answers, 2 right answers. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Dennis Maloney. I have 6 children. All 6 graduated college. 4 of them hold master's degrees and beyond. And I also am an educator. I'm retired after 35 years. 10 of them as teacher, 25 years, all the way up through and retiring as a principal. And I have a couple of questions for your board members. I am to assume from Mr. Galata that other than Common Core, or prior to it, there was no standards.
I've never said that.
Well, you sort of implied that our choices...
Completely misunderstood what I said. Not even close.
Our choices were 3. Go back to your choices being 3.
Yeah,
Did not include the New York State region standards.
We'll talk about the first thing or the second thing.
Number 2. To Mrs. Teresi. You described some really nice educational situations where teachers explain things to students. And you also described certain instructional aids were employed. Am I to assume that none of those existed before Common Core? Well, you implied that they were the reason why Common Core is succeeding. When I was a principal, my teachers all had better be using that. And that was long before Common Core. Thank you.
Young lady.
Hi, my name is Betsy Spontak. I'm a John J. and Van Wyck parent, and I'm the person who wrote a letter to the school district today about the fact that I only got an e-news notification that this meeting was taking place tonight. That's probably why this auditorium is so empty. Because I don't make a regular habit of checking the home page on the website to see what important events are occurring. Just yesterday or the day before, I got an email about the 8th grade moving up ceremony dates in June, and that's plenty of lead time. So I was really disappointed that the e-news notification only went out today, that this meeting was taking place tonight. So that's probably why the auditorium is so empty. But I do have a question. I agree with, I'm sorry, I'm bad with names, the woman on the right, your comment about standardized tests and pigeonholing people and so on. But years ago when my kids were old enough to start taking assessment tests, which, if I'm not mistaken, is before Common Core was adopted, they did great. I'm lucky enough to have smart kids, and they all did great. And then assessments were to meet the Common Core standards before they were really brought up to speed on the Common Core curriculum, and from what I understand, like all the kids' grades tanked on these assessment tests. Am I mistaken in assuming that these assessment tests were put in place before Common Core was really in place? I mean, whether Common Core is good or bad or indifferent, why were the tests put in place before Common Core was really brought up to speed? That's like, you know, if you're a hairdresser, your employer says, you're going to be given a test on nuclear fission, and if you fail, you're going to lose your job.
A couple of things happened at the test. One, they began to assess before implementation. However, and more importantly, the children took the tests, and according to newspaper reports published right here in New York, the cutoff scores, the results were determined after the children had taken the tests and the raw scores were in. The Pearson Company came in and told the 95 folks that were supposed to determine whether you got 1, 2, 3, or 4, well, this is where we're basically setting the standards, and according again to newspaper reports, everybody knew that the results were going to be lower. So that's not measuring children against standards, that's measuring standards against children and then manipulating the results to get what you wanted to say, which means that the scores don't mean anything. This isn't the first time that's happened in New York. In New York, you had, even before the Common Core, your State Department of Education changed the results of your state assessment tests after the fact.
Thank you.
Which means the scores don't mean anything.
That's a very important question, and I think we asked the question and we kind of blow right past it. But really, why did we implement these assessments before we started teaching the curriculum? That's a very, very important question to ask, because we keep being, we're told, you know, it's the implementation, it's the implementation. That was a deliberate decision. If these are the people who are so brilliant that they are coming up with the fundamental, full-fledged overhaul of our education system, is that a mistake? Or was that to get the mechanism in place before people could say, we don't want this?
Hi, my name. My name is Denise Safuto. Ms. Teresi, correct? My question to you is for the math state test. Now, all teachers teach using differentiated instruction, working with kids on different ability levels. On the state test, the teachers are given the test to correct. Are they instructed, here, Ms. Smith, here's the way student A got it, student B, student C. If they did it in one step, it's correct. If they did it in 2 steps, it's correct. If it's done in 3 steps, is it correct?
When we talk about differentiation of instruction.
When you teach.
When we teach.
When you teach all children different ways, the way they understand it.
Right.
When it comes to correcting that math state test, do you say to the teacher who's correcting the state test, here, Mr. Smith, this is the way one kid can get it, this is the way another kid can get it, this is the way another kid can get it? No. They say, here is the one answer. If this is not the way it's done with Common Core, it's wrong. So differentiated instruction works in the class, but not on the test.
Hi, my name is Jean Marie Lorenzo. I am a mother of 3, 2 who graduated from the Wappinger Central School District and 1 who is in 2nd grade. My eldest is 20 years old and went through Van Wyck with, while he is brilliant, he figured out that if he pulled out his cell phone in class, he could get kicked out and then sent to the in-school suspension room. At the end of the year, he was given what I would refer to when I was a classroom teacher as a Circle 65, which is to say that although his grades did not add up to the 65 that he got at the end of the year, that's what his teachers gave him. I added without Common Core math, but I still came up with an answer that said that Chris didn't pass. He went on to Orchard View Alternative High School, where he graduated, because he had creative teachers with creative ways to achieve standards. Standards that I assume Wappingers had in place before Common Core existed. I challenged the Wappinger Central School District to go grade by grade and wonder if we really think that the standards are what was the problem before, or if it wasn't accountability and holding the teachers accountable for the standards that they set and then making the students repeat the grade if they didn't achieve the standards. Mrs. LaValle, you addressed and said, who decided standards were the problem? I agree with you. And I'm sorry, I forget your name, but principal?
Ms. Teresi, Don.
You said that the Common Core standards are not the same as a curriculum. And I agree with you to the extent that creativity, you alluded to it by saying that
instruction.
Right, so we had that at Orchard View Alternative High School when the teachers taught creatively. But if you have the standards that you already have in place and hold the teachers accountable for it, you could have creativity without a different set of standards. So we don't have only two choices. We have a choice of keeping the old standards and holding ourselves accountable to them.
My name is Laura Labansi. I have two young children in the Wapanger Central School District, grades 4 and grades 2. My head is spinning right now with all these different things. There's so many questions that I want to ask. One being, can anyone justify for the elder residents in this county the heavy burden that's going to be placed upon them financially because of all of these unfunded mandates and how much is going to come down on us as taxpayers, especially the elderly people who have a minimal cash income. That's number one. That's who built this district, is our older people. Two, I'm going to segue in a different direction. I spoke at, not this last board meeting, the board meeting before, and my statement, which I'm going to try to reiterate, is we were told about homework, and now I heard something about university, parent university, and we're going to teach the parents how to teach our children. Homework is to go over what was taught in the classroom that day, not another subject to be taught at home. A. B. Parents, it takes two parents to hold a home nowadays. Parents don't usually get home until very late. Okay, they're lucky if they see their children before they get to kiss them goodnight and put them to bed. There is no time for a parent to sit and have to do all of this. I do with my children because I'm lucky enough to be able to work from home several days a week, but you need to take into consideration that there are parents out there that don't have this kind of time. And you know what? I'm not going to a university again. I did this already.
Suzanne Coyle again, thank you for coming tonight. I forgot to say that before. I just want to quickly read something, and it addresses standardized testing and the Common Core from a piece that I wrote recently. And I'll stick to my time, I promise. Districts have been informed by the state that they're free to develop their own curriculum, but in reality they are not. The curriculum is ultimately driven by the standardized tests and the Common Core standards, which of course are copyrighted. So every district could potentially have their own curriculum, whether it be a good one or a bad one, but then every student in the state has to take the same exact standardized tests. Tests that, in my opinion, are of no real value to educators, students, they're developmentally inappropriate. We know they've had branding, vague questions, etc. Not to mention more lost instructional time during the subsequent grading of the tests when teachers have to leave their classes. In some districts, it's promoting teaching to the test, and especially in elementary grades, where there aren't designated time periods for subjects. We all know that some teachers are spending more time on math and ELA, as opposed to other subjects. In our district, is using other proven valid assessments that are preferred and being used for their students. And we're not even using standardized tests anymore, starting right now this school year, for placement or any purpose at all, which I'm thankful for. But regarding, I'll just skip ahead. Let me see, I'm sorry. Laura Slover, who is, oh shoot, I lost my place because I heard the 30. The Common Core Park, the consortium, the Park Consortium, issued a press release recently, and their Chief Executive Officer, Laura Slover, said this exact statement: high-quality assessments go hand-in-hand with high-quality instruction based on high-quality standards. You can't have one without the other. The park states only see quality assessments as a complete part of instruction and not a break from instruction, and that the tests are intended to drive curriculum. I find that alarming as a parent, and I just wanted to share that since standardized testing had come up earlier this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kathy Cepeta, and I'm an educator. I'm a teacher of ESL. Y quiero saber dónde está la gente española es un horror, qué desastre que nosotros no están aquí. I'm very disappointed that the notice for this meeting has not reached the Hispanic community. That's disgraceful. As an ESL teacher, I decided to stop my career as an educator so I could go around to all 62 counties and educate good people like these beautiful teachers here and good parents like here about what's going on in our classrooms. We need to take back local control. And if you look at the election results, people don't like Common Core. There's a Stop Common Core ballot line and it will stay for 4 years. We will continue our fight to restore local control to the classrooms. Many of us don't know this, but as educators, we take an oath. It's a law. It's a law in our books to uphold the Constitution of the United States as well as New York State Constitution. And the parents are the primary educators. As Dr. Lumsick said, we don't need the federal government in our classrooms. You're great teachers, you're great parents. Let's bring this back where the kids can learn and the teachers can teach.
You mentioned the Stop Common Core ballot line, and what that refers to, if you look at the candidate's plan, it's going to be the option B plan, which is you repeal Common Core, you replace it with a very similar set of standards, very similar to Common Core.
Lies. Lies.
Okay.
My name is Marcella
Or
Burns.
the other option is to go back to the No Child Left Behind provisions. If you look at the plan, it very clearly states higher standards, college and career ready. Take a look at his own website. Take a look at his own website and read what he's saying. It's very vague, I know, but take a look at what he's saying.
I'm Marcella Burns, and I just wanted to read one passage from the book Towards Soviet America, Chapter 5, The United Soviet States of America. Among the elementary measures the American Soviet government will adopt to further the Cultural Revolution are the following. The schools, colleges, and universities will be coordinated and grouped under the National Department of Education and its state and local branches. The studies will be revolutionized, being cleansed of religious, patriotic, and other features of bourgeoisie ideology. The students will be taught on the basis of Marxism, dialectical materialism, internationalism, and general ethics in the new socialist society. Present obsolete methods of teaching will be superseded by a scientific pedagogy. Now that's where we are today. And we all heard recently that you have to pass the bill before you can read the bill. Now that's totally ridiculous. Everybody knows that you don't pass anything without reading it, and this is what we've been duped again.
Thank you. This will be the last speaker for the meeting.
Good evening, panel, board president, administration, and everyone here tonight. As a community member and parent, I'd like to just thank everybody for coming out to hear both sides. I think this was a little long overdue. I'm glad at least that we finally did it, and at least the people attending tonight and watching at home have gotten a perspective on both sides, and then obviously everyone can have their own opinion and determination. A couple things is one, No Child Left Behind has left all children behind. It is a failed government product. Whether you want to call it program, initiative, why would we think that Common Core is now going to fix things? It's just going to be another failed, just look at the history, okay? Going back to region standards, I don't know, I graduated Regents, I don't want to date myself, but okay. I just have 2 or 3 quick questions for the panel, maybe from left to right, they can just answer it. One, I'd just like to know what each of you think is college and career ready. I'd also like to know your opinion on how, from the elementary school level, how Common Core offers enrichment to those students. We talked about some special ed children, which is very important, but we should not forget about children who show the ability to excel. What's happening with them? Are they being left behind in the classroom because there are no enrichment programs? Common Core does not offer enrichment, grammar, writing, and things for children to excel. So if you could just give me your thoughts on those two questions, I'd appreciate it. And again, I thank everyone up on the stage, the panel, and everyone here tonight. Thank you.
Anyone on the panel would like to respond to those suggestions?
Mr. Sloshaw. Mr. Sloshaw, how you doing? Good. You bring up a good point about how No Child Left Behind has caused a lot of problems, has left a lot of children behind. That's the whole point of the ESEA flexibility waiver. Elementary and Secondary Education Act, ESE flexibility waiver. What happened was No Child Left Behind was passed in 2002. It was due for reauthorization in 2007. Along those years, they were finding out, there was a lot of problems with schools being identified as schools needing improvement. Even though they were making progress, it became a problem. Congress did not reauthorize No Child Left Behind in 2007 when they were supposed to. They still haven't reauthorized it. So it's like, how many years overdue now? 7 years overdue when they were supposed to reauthorize it. So what happened was President Obama offered a blueprint for his educational reform to Congress as a suggestion of what to reauthorize No Child Left Behind as. They still didn't act. So that's why he offered this ESEA flexibility waiver, which the states have went to because there was so much problem with No Child Left Behind that the waiver, the flexibility waiver, it's called flexibility, it provides states with the flexibility to give the states and the local school districts more control over their educational decisions. There's still accountability measures, obviously. Don't just hand out money and say, here you go, have a good time. But that's the whole process with the ESEA waiver. Okay, Congress still has not reauthorized. Congress could reauthorize it, and they could decide whatever policies they want. But right now, the ESE flexibility waiver is really what we're operating on, and is what a vast majority, 40+ states are operating on. Almost all of them. I think there's very few that have not taken that waiver and have not adopted Common Core or the option B, the other set of college and career ready standards. The states that you're hearing about that are repealing Common Core, they're going from Common Core back to either option B, or Oklahoma just went back to No Child Left Behind, and they can't scramble fast enough to get their college and career ready standards in place to go back to option B.
With regard to option A and option B, NCLB, race to the top, this is the United States of America. If option A or option B doesn't work, we the people should come up with option C. The federal government is not going to have thrown a set of shackles onto our children and tell us we get to choose which one we want to be shackled to. As far as my response to the question, what do I think college and career ready is? I think college and career ready is propaganda terminology that we've been told should define our children's education system. I don't want my children college and career ready. I want my children educated. And if that means that they don't want to go to college, that's great. If that means they're successful in their career, that's great too. I trust my children and myself and my family and humanity to educate our children and have them grow, like every generation before us, into a generation of adults that are capable of managing our world.
Thank you. Last question or statement?
I just have a brief statement. My name is Richard Amodio, and I've listened to all of the people who have spoken before me, and most of them have said what I probably would have said, and probably more eloquently than I would have. I graduated from Wappinger Central School District 55 years ago, and I'm probably older My daughter graduated from here in 2002. She graduated from Joan Jay. Both of us, I would say, have done very well in our lives with the education we received. My problem with Common Core, as well as other things that are being handed down to us and foisted on us by the federal government, are causing us to lose our country. And we have to fight this. We have to fight these federal impositions with all that we have. I also have a brother-in-law who's 91 years old and who fought in World War II and in Korea. He cries sometimes, as do I, as to what's happening to our country. That's all.
Thank you very much. We're going to wrap up the forum with the panelists each having 2 minutes to make a summary statement. And then Mrs. Jowell will make a statement, and I'll say a brief few words myself. Dr. Leslie, we'll start with you.
I was first, the last time, so we'll start together.
Oh, thank you. Ms. Teresi.
I just want to thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to ask you to always keep an open mind on the Common Core. I understand your frustration with assessments. I hear you. They came in a little too quick. And we're looking at the basics of what we're trying to teach our children. And college readiness is important. I went to school in, here we go again, dating myself, in the 80s in high school, in the 90s, on my undergrad, in the year 2000, towards my master's. And now I'm going back for my doctorate. I've already taken 1 or 2 classes. I can tell you, they are distinctly different. And it's not just because I'm using microfiche and now the computer. It's a different language. It's a different way. And yes, we want each child to do what they can, but please understand, our society is changing. The jobs that are out there are changing. They are not the same jobs that they used to be. Having a child without a master's degree is going to be a little difficult in life later on. My kids' generation, they're going to be forced to have those master's degrees. And that Common Core is going to at least assist them to be a little bit deeper in thinking in what they do, not spit back information that our curriculum has done for many years. And I thank you once again.
Thank you. Mr. Galetta?
Like many of you, my initial impression of Common Core was that of confusion and frustration. But I knew it was something new, and I was willing to give it a chance. I started attending Common Core informational sessions and forums last year to learn more about it, and I quickly realized that this was a very complicated issue, which has led to a lot of confusion and misunderstanding. Yes, real hardships were created by its poor implementation, but it's not the fault of the Common Core standards. The more I researched the issues surrounding Common Core from many sources and points of view, the more my belief became that although it got off to a bad start, staying the course with Common Core is absolutely the best path for us to take. Tonight, I wanted to raise awareness and emphasize the realities of the law, because I think that has been missing from most conversations about Common Core. I see the value of the Common Core standards and I support them. But I'm a parent. I'm not a teacher. And the credibility of my opinion on how the standards are working in the classroom would be limited. That's why I'm very grateful to Mrs. Teresi and the Wapengers School District staff who are actually working with the Common Core standards in our schools, in our classrooms, with our students. I want to thank them for sharing their insight and experience in how the Common Core standards are working.
Thank you.
Slavery was also
Mrs. Lavelle? Excuse me. Mrs. Lavelle?
Just very quickly, a reference to the math and calculus trigonometry question about whether or not we're going to be able to offer it. 8% of our students in Wapengers Junior High and 5% of our students in Van Wyck Junior High showed mastery on the Common Core assessments. If I'm a teacher and my job depends on making sure that every child shows proficiency, I'm very likely, as a teacher and as a district, to spend our resources getting the 70+% of students who are failing these assessments to pass them. I don't think we're going to have a lot left over for the higher level math classes. When creating the U.S. Department of Education, the United States Congress enacted statutory law that states parents have the primary responsibility for the education of their children, and that states, localities, and private institutions have the primary responsibility for supporting the parental role. Parents' fundamental right to direct the education of their children is consistently recognized and protected by the U.S. Supreme Court. Federal law recognizes parents, not teachers, not boards of education, not legislators, and especially not private interest groups, but parents as the primary educators of their children. Common Core eviscerates that law and principle. Parents know the power and money behind the Common Core. We know what we're up against. We know what legislation's been put in place. We know the level of financial interest, the money that's been spent, the money that there is to be made. We've seen the political maneuvering, and we've watched as the program's been pushed forward as if we're not standing here opposing it. But we are undeterred. Our children are not for sale. We've done our homework. We know this is hurting our children, and we know why. And we will rescue them from this non-education program, which attempts to rob them of their freedom and their futures. We bore our children into this world for their own sake. We did not breed them for a workforce, and we will not have them used. I'd like to thank you all again for coming. Thank you. Dr. Watson?
I attended a session in Pennsylvania where proponents of Common Core, in explaining the program, talked about McDonald's. And what they said was, if you buy a hamburger at a McDonald's in City A, and then you go to a McDonald's in City B and buy the hamburger, it's the same hamburger. So shouldn't all of our schools produce the same quality standard product? When did our children move from the clients of the educational system to the products of the educational system? And if they're the product, who's the client? I thought our schools were created to serve our kids, not someone else. When we look at McDonald's, the first thing they do is make sure that all the ground meat is identical. And if the ground meat doesn't meet the standard, they dispose of it. So, are we going to make sure all of our children are identical? And if they don't meet the standard, they don't get an education? Who decides that? If the ground meat at McDonald's is too good, they lower the standard. You heard questions tonight about gifted children, and we talked a little bit about the research. Common Core does nothing to go beyond the standard. See, in Common Core, the goal isn't your child achieving excellence. The goal is your child reaching the standard. But what if that child already met the standard before they walked into the classroom? And we all have kids that do that. That kid will test as a success, but education for that child failed. Education isn't that. We're not producing children. This is not supposed to be a manufacturing model. College and Career Ready says everybody will be the same. Everybody will be, as the word says, common. But our children aren't common. And this country is based on the premise that there is no such thing as a common child. And our teachers became teachers because they believed that. And they gave their lives to making sure that we did not have common children, but that each child in each classroom could be the person they were created to be. Common Core destroys that. And there's no way that any of us should stand by and allow that to continue. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the panelists once again for sitting up here and not only stating your perspective, but being at the microphone for me to ask you questions individually, and for that I appreciate it. In closing, before we end this evening's program, I'd like to take a moment to recognize and thank our District Senator-elect, Mrs. Sue Serino, who came out tonight to listen to your voice. It is voices like Mrs. Serino who will change education. Sue has not only been a lifetime friend of mine and a boss, but she's a mentor. And that is why she took legislation and I took on the Board of Education. So thank you, Sue. Along with thanking the panelists once again, I'd like to thank the Board of Education for joining the PTA Council in hosting this forum. I believe that healthy discussions is what makes changes and policies in our education. Along with PTA Council's Executive Board, our volunteers who are here timing and handing out programs, I think it's really important that we take a moment to not only emphasize what we feel the educators aren't doing to help our children, because I know as a parent and as a council president and as a former board president, we get frustrated sometimes, but our educators in the Wappinger Central School District work tirelessly to help our children be successful and to communicate as best as we can. So I'd like to give them a round of applause. Regardless of everyone's individual feelings regarding the Common Core state standards, it is evident that our children have strong advocates in this auditorium and all across the states that have the Common Core state standards implemented. It is our job to listen openly and to have our legislators make educational decisions based upon that. So tonight, thank you again for coming out and have a good evening and get home safely. Mr. Whitaker?
I want to compliment the fine gentleman that was the last speaker. We're from the same generation. I graduated from high school 60 years ago. Having said that, am I 81? No. I'm asking the job, you know. The board is indebted to your services to this district. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Same thing with the administrative staff team. Outstanding for you to be here. I appreciate it greatly. And I will tell the superintendent that you were all here because he asked me to check. Good night, everyone. Thank you very much.